Ugh, boys are so complicated. I know a lot of people have strange relationships with the opposite gender, but I can guarantee you that my tale really takes the cake. Do you think you have problems talking with boys? Imagine how confused I got the first time I ever saw one. I was head over heels and a complete idiot. That's right, I didn't see a boy until I was 17. I didn't even know there were other genders besides females. I'm really not kidding. You're probably wondering how that was possible. Well, that's kind of a long story, but I promise it's worth the wait. Before I go into any of that, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel. If you do it, your crush will send you a message in the next 2 days. I promise. I didn't grow up with the concept of a crush or romance. Instead, I was raised in a very alternative way. When I was just a baby, I somehow ended up in the middle of nowhere in a big house filled with only women and girls. We did everything together. We referred to ourselves as a commune, but in retrospect, it was more like a cult. We all wore the same clothes and had our hair done in the same way. We all looked eerily alike. To outsiders, it was like we were all sisters. In actuality, the headmistress decided what we would look like and gave us little makeovers to be her walking clones. Some girls were lucky enough to have naturally blonde hair, but I was forced to bleach my hair at a very young age. She took us having the same image very seriously. It went well beyond matching dresses and hair colors. This one time when I was around 8, this girl around my age went off into the woods without telling anyone. That kind of thing was explicitly against the rules. She ended up playing around the forest and got her head stuck in a broken maple tree. By the time some of the older members were able to find her, her hair was completely covered on the stuff from the tree. After maybe an hour of trying to wash it out, the headmistress came out with a knife and cut it all sloppily off. It looked so bad, but that wasn't the worst part. Next, she ordered us to line up and one by one, and she started giving everyone the same sloppy haircut. I loved my hair, and when she came to me, I cried as loud as I could. It wasn't my fault. Why was I being punished? There's no I here, the headmistress said as she lopped off my hair, which was already brittle enough from all of the bleaching. She also cut her hair in the end, effectively making us all hideous. That's just what the cult was all about. Wiping away our individual identity. I know this sounds like a nightmare, but for years it was just my life. There were lots of shady things I discovered from time to time, but I never addressed them because I found it normal, or I did for a while at least. One day, I decided to go on my own little adventure. I was only about 8. I didn't see any harm in it. I wasn't supposed to walk away from the farm, but I didn't feel like spending another grueling 8 hours tending the crops. I thought I could sneak away for a little bit, so I waited for the headmistress to leave. Next, I told the other girls I had to go to the bathroom, but I actually quickly ducked behind a corner when they weren't looking. The next thing I did was quickly run away from the house. I had never been farther than the farm at this point. I expected to see more of the forest or something, but instead, I just saw a fence. It wasn't a pleasant picket fence, though. It had barbed wire twisted around it everywhere. Next, I heard the headmistress. She sounded like she was on the other side of the fence, but I couldn't see. I tried to lean up for a better look on the other side, but ended up cutting my hand up pretty bad. I immediately shouted out in pain, and before I could see where she came from, the headmistress was right there. She wasn't worried about me getting hurt, though. She was very angry. She didn't bother to help me bandage it up and instead dragged me back to the rest of the girls while I was crying. Next, she pulled me up by my arm and started lecturing all of us. First, about how irresponsible we were that someone could get away so easily, and then about the dangers of leaving the protected grounds. If you thought the haircut was weird, you should brace yourself for what came next. After I got my hand bandaged up, we all had to wear wraps on our hands. It was so weird. The other girls complained that it made the farm work difficult, but the headmistress said that we were all in this together. Even though I had a feeling there was something off about our lives, I didn't really have anything to compare it to. The only things I ever read were printouts the headmistress made. I had never watched TV or heard music that we hadn't played ourselves. I honestly thought that the world just sort of ended beyond the walls. The headmistress explained how we lived at the center of the world, and beyond the fences, it was full of monsters and the unknown. I know some of the things I used to believe sound so stupid, but try not to judge me. It's all I ever knew. You're probably wondering how we kept ourselves busy in such a small world. Well, it wasn't easy at all. First off, there was a lot of praying. My entire existence focused around this religion that the headmistress made up on her own. Our beliefs focused on the importance of discipline and hard work. Anytime we weren't out on the farm, we were praying. One time we literally spent 4 hours straight, just knelt down in silence. My knees were so bruised. Praying and working were the only things we were permitted to do. I asked the headmistress what we were praying so hard for, because my knees were really starting to hurt. She told me that we were praying for the only two important things in life, the safety of our fellow sisters and creating babies. I know what you're thinking. How do you get babies in a society with only women? You need to promise not to laugh at what I'm about to tell you, because I never got a proper talk about where babies come from. You'll have to wait a little bit, because to understand where we thought babies come from, you need to understand our ideas of the world. See, we were raised on a belief that we came from the farm itself. I truly believe that the entire world fit in this tiny 4-acre plot. You might wonder why we never tried to explore beyond the walls. Well, we were raised on horror stories. One day, we didn't have enough vegetables growing on the farm. The headmistress made us cut our portions in half. I was so hungry. I asked her if I could go try to find some food beyond the wall, or maybe even set up a new farm where maybe the ground was more fertile. She warned me that if I went beyond the walls, I would be gobbled up by massive monsters. She told us about big monsters made of metal and flashing lights that would swallow us whole just for fun. A part of me wanted to be skeptical of this, but people did disappear from time to time. I didn't really understand until I was a little older, maybe around 11. We had a roll call every morning after our sunrise prayers. One day, Sarah, the girl who always stood next to me, wasn't there. I assumed she was sick, but I didn't see her at all. During lunch, the headmistress came to announce that during the night, a magical force had drawn her away and she was eaten by monsters. I was so scared. She warned us all never to go outside of the fence, no matter what we saw. Now, I thought this was all crazy until I saw one of those monsters with my own eyes. It was a giant, flying, buzzing monster. Next, we all ran inside and called for help. The headmistress ordered us to pray for our safety. We knelt together for about 8 hours in prayer and were so relieved when our headmistress let us know that our prayers were heard and no one was to be eaten today. Some of you probably already figured out what we wasted our time praying away: an airplane. It might seem silly to you, but at that moment, I never felt stronger. This was the proof I needed to completely dedicate myself to our way of life. I stopped questioning what we did and became a model member of our community. That night, we held a little funeral service for Sarah, and I led the prayer. Like all the other times before, we didn't have a body to bury. Instead, we buried a pair of her shoes into the ground in hopes it could help nurture the earth and make new babies. We were told that we were all grown from seeds deep inside the ground. This is why we had to work so hard on the farm. If we slacked off on the farm work just one day, we would risk losing all the new babies that were supposed to bloom that season. And this brings us to the biggest lie of them all. Now I'll explain how we got the babies exactly. It's pretty hard to get babies without any men around, of course. Well, the headmistress did the unthinkable and lied to us all about it. I will never forget the first time I was really aware of what was happening. The headmistress said that she had to go on an important mission to the outside. She was accompanied by 4 other senior members. I asked her where she was going, and she said she was going to collect the baby seeds. When she came back, she would put them in the secret basement, and if we worked hard enough all season, then we would have new babies. Getting new babies was the best time of the whole year. I'm not kidding. I really thought you grew babies out of the ground like a carrot. I love babies. It was a rite of passage for the older girls in the commune to get a baby of their own to name. We would then raise the baby together. When I was turning 15 and finally coming of age, I tried to learn everything there was to know about babies. And when I felt I was ready, I asked if she could help me grow my baby. The mistress thought about this for a moment. Then she told me I have to work harder and I have to prove my loyalty to the commune. Having a baby is the highest honor of the whole commune. The following years, as I went up in rank, I got more privileges to explore the property. The day of my 17th birthday, the headmistress asked to meet with me. See, since we held work at such a high honor, our birthdays were celebrated by getting a new job. For the most part, this meant switching our duties on the farm and rotating out of your old job. I had kind of expected to be switched from pumpkins to apples, but I was shocked to hear she had a much bigger job in mind. She enlisted me as a watchguard for the perimeter. I was told it was a very important and dangerous job given to only the most trusted officials. After this, she would make sure to grow me a baby. It was my sole job to walk around the perimeter the whole day and make sure no one was coming in or getting out. She entrusted me with the sole piece of technology I thought we carried on the estate, a walkie-talkie. As someone who never really ventured near the fence, I didn't think it would be such an active job. You would actually be surprised by how life-changing this promotion was. One day, when I was making my rounds, I experienced the most traumatic thing in my life. I heard the sound of branches breaking on the other side of the fence. I immediately called the headmistress. She told me to go back to my room and she would take care of it. My curiosity got the better of me, and I decided to blow out my candle, shut off my walkie-talkie, and duck behind a bush to watch. Sure enough, a few minutes later, the headmistress showed up. She was holding some contraptions I had never seen before. I have since learned the names of these two objects. The first was a flashlight. It lit everything up so much better than the lantern. I could see everything. I could now see that the sound of the branches breaking was Missy, one of the teen members of the community. At first, I felt some relief that there weren't any dangerous intruders or evil monsters. It didn't take long for those pleasant feelings to leave me. Right after Missy started apologizing for leaving, the headmistress pulled out the second contraption. What I know now was a gun. Missy immediately started running again, and the headmistress chased her until I couldn't see them anymore. Next, I heard a big bang. I didn't know what a gun did, so I just assumed a giant tree fell on them. I rushed to go and help them both, but I didn't see any broken trees in sight. I ran right into the headmistress. I asked her what had happened and where Missy was. She asked what I saw, and I told her the truth, or at least part of it. I just said that I heard Missy cry out, and then I heard a large crash. I was crying so hard, but the headmistress told me a monster had kidnapped her and it was too late. She tried to fight the monsters off, but in the end, it was just too late. The next thing she did was rush me back inside before I was going to be stolen too. She made me promise that I would never go into the forest and that I would never tell anyone what I saw. Part of my job was keeping the illusion that we were safer than we were. Something just didn't add up for me. I was curious to know what deviant force had convinced Missy to cross over the fence. Little did I know I was about to find out for myself. I was just going about my regular rounds when I heard a loud rumbling sound. There, approaching the fence, was one of the monsters the headmistress had talked about. It was large with two large glowing eyes on the front, and it looked like there was a person trapped inside. I couldn't see what they looked like, but they were waving. How was that possible if all the people in the world were within these walls? I called the headmistress using the walkie-talkie and told her what I had seen. A monster holding some poor girl hostage. The headmistress told me to immediately go home, but I wasn't about to let someone else fall victim to a monster. I shouted at the person to hold on. I was going to rescue them. That's when the person came out from the monster. They were not like any girl I'd ever seen. They were super tall with broad shoulders and hair all over their face. They spoke with a super deep voice that made my stomach drop. Hey, they said. What's all the commotion about? Are you okay? My mouth went dry, and I couldn't get any words to come out at all. What was coming over me? It felt like I had butterflies in my stomach, and I couldn't think of what to say. Oh wow, you're actually kind of cute. I didn't know what to say, but my face got so red and hot. I was uncomfortable, but in a good way. What was this feeling? Next, the headmistress showed up. She ordered me to get away from that boy at once. Boy? I hadn't even heard that term. The boy suddenly got very defensive. He yelled at the headmistress, asking if she was crazy. He asked what she was doing, having some teenager locked in around barbed wire. He looked back at me and told me to come with him, and he'd get me out of here if I wanted. She does not want that, the headmistress yelled. I was already halfway on the fence, ignoring the barbed wires and all. It was like I had no control over my body and some kind of primal instincts were kicking in. If you cross that line, Missy, you'll never be allowed back here ever again. Mark my words. My body had already made up my mind, though. I don't think anything in the world could have stopped this urge to follow this boy. The headmistress stormed off. He helped me up and opened up the monster for me. I was nervous to get in. I bowed down and thanked the monster for safe passage. What? You've never seen a car before? The boy laughed. He explained that it wasn't a monster at all. On the commune, I felt like I knew the entire world, and now I suddenly knew nothing about anything. As we were driving along the city, I saw so many things. I asked to stop at everything. I had never seen street lamps or puppies or even a lake. Everything was so scary and new. Carlos, as the boy was called, patiently drove me around explaining everything. I was surprised when we finally found something I could explain to him. Nailed right on one of those trees was a picture of my sister with the words "missing" printed on it. I shouted at him to stop the car and we hopped out. Next, he asked me what was going on, and I explained that this was the picture of one of the sisters that just joined the commune last month. He said that we needed to report this to the police. The child had been abducted from her home around that time. Impossible. We went down to the station and they pulled up a bunch of missing children's reports. It turns out all of the children that had been grown at the farm were actually just stolen. I asked if they could find where I had been from, but unfortunately, the records didn't go that far back. I led the police back to the commune, where they arrested the headmistress, along with some of the senior members, and took custody of all of the minors there, all 50 of them. The minors were to be returned to their homes or put up for adoption. As I would be counted as a legal adult starting the next month, Carlos said I could just live with him. He was going to teach me what love was. My entire life was a lie. Carlos helped me get started in the real world. He introduced me to lots of amazing things: ice cream, grocery stores, and all new sorts of clothes that didn't have to match anyone's. Carlos told me it was cute, but I knew I was hard sometimes. The moment I walked into his apartment, it was like I had stepped into some futuristic alternate reality. I screamed the second I saw a baby trapped inside a box. I punched the box and broke it to let the baby free. Turns out it was an entertainment device called a TV, an expensive device that I smashed within minutes of knowing him. I explained to him how badly I wanted a baby, and if he thought we'd be able to find seeds around here. He laughed right in my face. When he told me where babies actually came from, well, I didn't believe him. Gross! I asked him if we could adopt one of my younger sisters, and he said no. He wanted to put my cult life behind us, and part of letting go was making new connections and letting go of the old ones. In the end, we ended up moving far away from that city and far away from any of my sisters. I got used to technology and even got a job at a local daycare. I was normal. I was almost forgetting everything about my sisters until the day I found out I was pregnant. I was so overjoyed. It was fun sharing it with Carlos, but I wanted to share it with my sisters as well. It was then that I really started to miss them. Carlos was very adamant that I cut them out completely, but I didn't agree so much. Secretly, I made a Facebook account where I tried to get into contact with them. I talked to a few of my sisters about what they were doing. Most of them were still in school for them. The transition wasn't too much as they were still young. I reached out to my closest friend from the commune. We were the same age, both freed when we were about 18. Turns out she was not happy with her new life at all. She hated technology and was too scared of boys. She told me she struggled very hard just to survive and she was incredibly lonely. I wanted to share the news of my pregnancy with her, but that seemed to send her over the edge. A few days later in the mail, I got a letter from her saying she never wanted to see me again. I showed the note to Carlos, and he said that it was my fault for purposely getting involved with those people. He accused me of purposely looking for drama because I like to play victim. It was then that I saw Carlos was not the knight in shining armor I thought he'd be. I had no support system after that. Just when I thought things couldn't get any worse, I lost the baby. The doctors told me that I wouldn't ever be able to get pregnant. This devastated me. Carlos was very unsympathetic to my depression and bad mood. He was so nice and affectionate when we first got together, but he seemed to get bored of me very quickly. One time I was out shopping and I saw him kissing another girl. I ran right up to him and confronted him, but he told me that it wasn't his fault he wasn't satisfied in our relationship. Sorry, I just expected more from us, you know? He wasn't even willing to try to work through it. He put in divorce papers and ended up marrying the other girl. Even worse, they had a baby together. I was so sad and miserable, but I had no support at all. I was so used to having my sisters around me all the time. I didn't know how to handle being alone. I tried finding another boyfriend, but it's just so hard. I don't know the first thing about talking to boys. Plus, it seems no one wants a woman who can't bear a child. I miss my old home, and I would give anything to be back in my commune. I know a lot of people may not have wanted to live in a cult, but it was so much better than my life now. What's worse, not being able to have a child robbed me of the biggest honor I thought I could have. I am alone with no one to love me. I can't help but wonder what if the headmaster was right, and the only thing that was waiting outside the fence was hell.